Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. It's almost a year since the Ebola outbreak in the DR Congo, the longest ever in the country's history. So can it be stopped from spreading to neighboring countries?
A year of Ebola in our country, it is unusual. And we are there to stop this outbreak.
Public outrage in Sudan after the shooting of protesting school children on Monday. The military orders all schools and universities shut. Also on the program, using GPS to save lives. We meet a Kenyan lab technician who's created a tracking system to help check on pregnant nomadic women.
We cover 10 villages in Moyal. We know the number of pregnant women in each village.
And controversy, chaos and questions. Who won the 2019 African Champions League final? The answer isn't straightforward, but we'll do our best to explain in sports. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The Ebola epidemic raging in the eastern DR Congo marks its first year on Thursday. So far, 1,790 people have died of the dreaded hemorrhagic virus since the first cases were recorded on August the 1st last year. It is the second highest death toll from an outbreak in Ebola's history. Despite a campaign backed by the United Nations and international donors, doctors are struggling against an epidemic spreading with the help of mistrust, superstition, and militia attacks. Goma, the capital of North Kivu province, is the largest city in the area and borders Rwanda, and an announcement there today that a second affected person has died has left many in fear, frustration, and despair.
I'm very scared of Ebola. It's a dangerous disease, deadly. They're asking people to wash their hands.
Instead of touching them, you can bless them without putting your hands on their head. We follow this rule. It comes from the health authorities.
We're really piled in together. No room to move. You arrived tired out, so yes, of course there is contact. There's no way to avoid this contact.
Well, that person whose death was announced was the second case of Ebola to be confirmed in Goma, as the BBC's Gaius Kowene now reports.
This patient traveled hundreds of miles before reaching the city of Goma, a hub of 1 million people, and that shares the border with Rwanda. Now, he arrived here 2 weeks ago, but it's only last week that he started showing symptoms and was directly put in an Ebola treatment center that was newly built in the town of Goma. Professor Jean-Jacques Muyembe, who is the coordinator of the Ebola response team in the whole DRC, said that this patient reached the treatment center in critical condition and unfortunately died. Now, teams have been deployed to track everybody who may have been in touch with him so that they will be offered vaccination or tested to see if they don't have any treatment. And Professor Muyembe said he's very optimistic about the fight against Ebola.
A year of Ebola in our country, it is unusual. And we are there to stop this outbreak. And we will work to avoid the spreading of the disease to cross the borders and to go to other countries. So I am confident that we will work and stop this outbreak as soon as possible.
This Thursday will mark 1 year since the Ebola outbreak was declared in DRC. This is the 10th and so far the worst to hit the country. It has affected more than 2,500 people and has killed more than 1,700 people. Community resistance and insecurity have been slowing down the response. However, the response leaders have said they are changing their strategies to make sure they contain and eradicate it in the coming months. Gaius Kowene, BBC News, Goma.
The African Union mediator in Sudan has called for the swift prosecution of those responsible for the killing of children by security forces at a protest in North Kordofan. Hundreds of students took to the streets of several cities today to condemn the shooting dead on Monday of at least 4 students. The military has now ordered all schools and universities to close. Here's our Africa security correspondent, Tommy Oladipo.
Sudan's children are leading the latest wave of public outrage. They've been calling for justice, marching in different parts of the country after the killing of 4 protesting students on Monday in El Obeid city. This renewed unrest has threatened the resumption of talks between the military and the civilian opposition to form a transitional government. The African Union's mediator has joined the international condemnation of the killings and is calling for a speedy trial and prosecution of the perpetrators.
The African Union strongly denounces the killing of pupils taking part in a peaceful demonstration. What I would like to tell you is that after the end of the meeting yesterday between the protesters and generals, the gap between the different sides, or at least between the joint committee, has become extremely small.
The protests all began last December against the rule of the former president Omar al-Bashir. He now faces charges related to corruption, although on Wednesday morning he did not appear in court for the first session of his trial, which has now been postponed by 2 weeks. Mr. Bashir has been in detention since he was deposed by the military in April. But the current regime is also making enemies among the masses. Despite its promises to grant the people's wishes of a new civilian government, it is still failing to gain trust from some in the opposition, leaving Sudan's future still hanging in the balance. Tommy Oladipo, BBC News.
Well, let's get more on that story now. Joining me from Nairobi is Mureithi Mutiga, who's with the International Crisis Group. Could we just start with the issue of those talks to form a transitional government? They don't seem to be going anywhere. Where are we with those talks?
I'm afraid this is a pattern we've witnessed consistently. You know, the generals in general seem to have a policy of shutting talks. The protesters have been fairly united, but there are also tensions in their side. They are in a very difficult position, especially following the violent dispersal sit-in, which really left so many revolted, and many don't general at all.
Okay, Mureithi, I'm afraid we're having problems with your line from Nairobi there, so we'll just have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Mureithi Mutiga, who's with the International Crisis Group. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. The Islamic movement in Nigeria, who have been protesting for the release of their leader El Zakzaky, say they will temporarily suspend all street protests in order to, quote, allow for some new openings into the resolution of the issue, end quote. El Zakzaky has been held in detention since 2015. The Nigerian government recently proscribed the IMN and labeled it as a terrorist group. A flag-raising ceremony has been held at the Dusit D2 hotel complex in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, which was attacked by militant Islamists in January. It officially reopens tomorrow. At least 21 people, including employees of the hotel, were killed when Al-Shabaab militants stormed it in January. A United States congressional delegation led by the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has ended a 3-day visit to Ghana. Ms. Pelosi gave an emotional address to the Ghanaian parliament on the 400th anniversary of the first enslaved Africans arriving in America. She appeared tearful as she recalled the horrors of the slave trade. She also paid tribute to the contribution of African Americans had made to the United States.
This trip has been about what connects the United States and Ghana, friendship, but also a dark past. It is 400 years since the first Africans were sent across the Atlantic, the start of a trade that will claim millions of lives and shape both countries forever. This is the door of no return at the Elmina Castle, the main exit through which thousands of enslaved Africans were forcibly shipped to America and the Caribbean to live a life of slavery. Visiting the castle clearly had a profound impact on the U.S. lawmakers, as Speaker Pelosi told the Ghanaian parliament.
At Elmina Castle, we saw the dungeons where thousands were grotesquely tortured. At Cape Coast Castle, we stood before the door of no return, where countless millions caught their last glimpse of Africa before they were shipped to a life of enslavement. Being here has been a transformative experience for all of us.
For Ghana, 2019 has been celebrated as the year of return, a call for African diaspora everywhere to reconnect with their ancestral home. For many, it has reminded them of the way the country's past has shaped their future.
It's offering us a moment of sober reflection to get to know of the thing that our forefathers went through.
We were sold by our own chiefs, by our own uncles and our own fathers. I mean, we should stop blaming people and those things. We should concentrate on working hard, looking after ourselves.
400 years down the line, remembering how they were taken off our shores, it's a privilege to be alive today.
Where nobody, no one will be left out or left behind because of their race, their color, or their background.
The trip finished with a press conference at the U.S. Embassy. It has come at a time of heightened racial tension in the States, a reminder that the legacy of transatlantic slave trade is still felt to this day. Thomas Nadi, BBC News, Accra.
Now, how do you ensure that pastoral women have access to good health care while they are pregnant? That was the dilemma faced by Dahabu Adi, a lab technician at Kenya's Moyale Hospital, after she witnessed several miscarriages and a high maternal and infant mortality rate in remote areas due to lack of basic medical facilities among pastoral communities. So she invented a GPS tracking system to save the lives of the women and their babies. The scheme has so far helped more than 200 people since its introduction. Here's her story.
I personally have had 2 miscarriages recently. As a mother, I know the pain of losing your unborn child.
Dahabu devised a plan to use GPS trackers to keep pregnant women and their babies safe in remote areas of Moyale, Kenya. The Borana pastoral community migrates from place to place, but GPS allows healthcare teams to visit the women wherever they are.
We cover 10 villages in Moyale. We know the number of pregnant women in each village. We put a GPS tracker on the women, we locate them, go where they are and give them clinical assistance.
Since the scheme began, maternal and infant deaths have dropped in the villages.
IMU is a traditional wristband. Girls and mothers wear this. So we figured out a way to put the GPS in the IMU to give to them. They are happy to take it. We started this in February 2018. Since then, we have helped 268 women. I love doing this very much, and the main reason is that after a mother knows that she is pregnant, all she thinks about is how she's going to give birth safely. When she sees her child's eyes for the first time, you see joy all over her face.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, lots of transfer talk. Stick with us to find out who's going where in sports. I'm Peter Okwoche. The top stories this hour. The Democratic Republic of Congo is experiencing its worst ever outbreak of Ebola a year after the first cases were recorded. Officials say they are doing their best to stop the disease from spreading following the death of a man in the city of Goma on the border with Rwanda. And there have been mass demonstrations over the shooting of protesting school children in Sudan on Monday. The military council has ordered all schools to suspend their activities. The African Union has called for the perpetrators to be brought to book. Now, in the past few weeks, countries in West Africa have agreed to adopt a single currency called the ECHO. It is hoped that the new currency will come into circulation next year and will boost cross-border trade and economic development. Sophie Kenye asked the Ivory Coast Information Minister and Government Spokesperson Sidi Tiemoko Toure what were the advantages of this new currency for his coffee and cocoa producing nation.
It's a kind of step forward to try to make the integration of our economy, and it's very important to improve and integrate our economy. I think this new currency will make this difference.
There are others who are saying, look, there are bigger economies like Nigeria who will decide we are going to dominate the monetary policy. What are your concerns, if any?
We don't have to be afraid by Nigeria. Nigeria is need us, and we need Nigeria too. As big as the economy of Nigeria is, we need each other. We need all of us. So I think all this has to be done intelligently to make sure that we take profit of this integration at the African level. This is the only way to address this issue.
Now, Ivory Coast and Ghana recently agreed to impose a minimum price of $2,600 per ton of the chocolate ingredient. When you're already getting a lot of pushback from the chocolate industry, how are you handling that?
We have to do that because all that's for our farmers. They need more return back of their own investment to this work on the ground. So to make sure that this has to be done, it's better that the two big worldwide producers of chocolate has to be together to improve the price on the market level. So this is why we think that we have to do that on the ground.
So recently, Laurent Gbagbo was acquitted by the International Criminal Court.
Yeah.
He is in Belgium now, but many are asking, is he allowed back in Ivory Coast?
Depend on him and the court. We are not involved in this process. So this is not the process of Côte d'Ivoire. It's a process between him and the court.
So if he said, I want to come back to Ivory Coast, are the doors open for him?
He's an Ivorian, so he can come anytime he wants, but he has to finish with his process.
You have no worries at all if he said, I want to come back? And
no, not at all.
There will be no impact on the politics of Ivory Coast if he lands in Ivory Coast?
No, not at all.
My colleague Sophie Kenye there speaking to the Ivorian Minister for Information and Government spokesperson. You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports, and Pierre-Antoine is in the house.
Thank you, Peter. The decision to order a replay of the African Champions League final was thrown out today by the Court of Arbitration for Sports. Fans will remember Morocco's Wydad Casablanca leaving the pitch after scoring a disallowed equalizer in the second leg against the Tunisian side Esperance, who eventually lifted the trophy that night. It led to the Confederation of African Football ordering a rematch, a decision that both sides appealed against, and now it has been dismissed by the Court of Arbitration for Sport as the Executive Committee, and I quote, did not have the right to order this replay. It means we don't know if Esperance will keep their 2019 Champions League title or if Wydad will somehow end up being crowned champions with or without a replay. We are following this story and we'll bring you more as soon as we get it. Staying with football, where French media outlets are reporting that 22-year-old Nigerian attacker Henry Onyekuru is set to move from Everton to Monaco. The player spent last season alone in Galatasaray, scoring 14 goals in 31 matches. Onyekuru had been unable to obtain a work permit required for him to play in the English Premier League. Onyekuru's international teammate Victor Osimhen is set for a move too. He's expecting to arrive in northern France to sign for Lille. The 20-year-old forward is being seen as a potential replacement for Nicolas Pepe, who is closing in on a transfer to Arsenal. Osimhen is expecting to undergo a medical next week before signing a 5-year contract with Les Dogs. Lots of movements in the transfer window, but one player that isn't going anywhere is the Ivory Coast international Eric Bailly. The Manchester United defender twisted his knee in a pre-season warm-up match against Tottenham and has had surgery to fix it. It follows another knee injury that kept him out for a long spell last year and for the African Cup of Nations.
Yeah, he's had an operation and he'll miss best part of 4 or 5 months, I would think. Hopefully we'll get him back for around about Christmas. It was a positive news from the surgeon. He had the operation, was it this morning? And it was positive that it was all repaired and he'll be fine. And that's good news.
FIFA has announced today the nominees for the Best Player Awards, and it features Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah. They both had a great campaigns last season, with Liverpool being joint top scorers in the Premier League and with obviously a Champions League trophy. Mane also helped Senegal to reach the final of the African Cup of Nations. So both players are strong contenders for the title and will know their fate in the Italian city of Milan in September. Algerian's national team boss Jamel Belmadi is also in the running for Best Men's Coach of the Year, and the winners will be chosen following a public vote. Basketball now, and 7 host countries have been announced for the first ever Basketball Africa League season. Egypt, Senegal, Nigeria, Angola, Morocco, Tunisia and Rwanda have all committed to staging games. The league will be made up of 12 teams divided into 2 conferences and will operate in collaboration with the NBA.
We are going to help with more facilities. This facility here in Senegal is a perfect example. We want to scale these facilities throughout the continent. We've been partners here in Senegal. We're partners in Rwanda right now, in Kigali, and so we see opportunities, and I think as the African presidents talk to each other and they see that they can do this in a turnkey fashion to build these arenas and spur economic development and create enormous spirit in the community as well, we think it's a winning formula.
That's all the sport have for you today. Peter, what do you make of this new Basketball African League, and do you think the Nigeria team can win it?
I always think Nigeria can win it, but I think it's great, and it's going to be played along, with along the NBA format. So, as you mentioned, there are 2 conferences. I'm not sure what they're going to be called. In the States, it's the West and the East Conference. I don't know if this is going to be the same here, but I think it's a really, really good idea.
Yeah.
And have you cast your vote for the FIFA Player of the Year?
Oof, it's complicated. I need to think a little bit about it. You cast it already?
But I can't tell you who I did.
I want to.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Pierre-Antoine. Thank you very much. Now, just before we go, let's take another look at our top stories here on Focus on Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo is experiencing its worst ever outbreak of Ebola, just under a year after the first cases were recorded. Officials fear the disease could spread following the death of a man in the city of Goma on the border with Rwanda. The man is believed to have traveled hundreds of miles before arriving in the city of Goma. Teams are tracking those who came into contact with the victim in order to have them vaccinated. Earlier this month, a priest died from the virus in the same city, which has a population of more than 1 million and borders Rwanda. Newly published figures show the outbreak has killed over 1,800 people since it began a year ago. The World Health Organization declared Ebola a global health emergency last year, the highest level of alarm the UN agency can sound. It has only been used 4 times previously, including during the Ebola epidemic in parts of West Africa. That's it on Focus on Africa from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the team. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.